Ottawa spent about $2 billion to buy 400 million BTNX tests in those now familiar green boxes.
Welcome back to Northern Perspective, everyone. I'm Cypher.
And I'm Fox. Hey, Cypher, would you be surprised if I told you that yet another scandal has come to light courtesy of this government?
Not really. I'll believe anything at this point.
Well, this time it's not Trudeau or his ministers directly. It's Health Canada who's in the crosshairs. They spent $2 billion to purchase over 400 million COVID-19 rapid tests that didn't work as well as advertised.
Let's take a look.
Just some pictures of my mom.
When the pandemic hit, Janet Foley's 83-year-old mother, Marilyn, was living in this retirement home. To visit, Janet was first required to take a COVID-19 rapid test.
And I was an essential caregiver, so I had to be tested all the time. If you pass that test, then you can go in.
Begin by opening the pouch and removing the test device.
The retirement home's tests were from a Canadian company called BTNX. Ottawa spent about $2 billion to buy 400 million BTNX tests in those now familiar green boxes. But these rapid tests may not have worked as well as advertised.
So it looks like the data was manipulated for it to be more sensitive.
We asked several infectious disease specialists to review BTNX's clinical studies presented to Health Canada for approval. BTNX claimed its at-home rapid tests could detect COVID-19 more than 90% of the time, well above the World Health Organization's minimum threshold of 80%. But the scientists consulted by Global News found irregularities in those results. BTNX is based near Toronto, but its tests are made by a company in China. Global News found BTNX had removed dozens of samples from the test's original clinical study without explanation. That omission made the test appear more sensitive.
That removal of data is really a violation of all research principles.
BTNX said it deleted the data because the U.S. FDA was moving towards excluding retrospective positive samples, which BTNX did as well. But the FDA didn't change its guidelines until 1 year later, and experts said that explanation isn't convincing.
It's a complete data set that they changed. That's why it was strange.
This biomedical researcher conducted a study for Spain's health system. She recommended against buying the test, finding it was among the worst at detecting COVID-19 in asymptomatic patients.
In this case, was among the lowest sensitivity of what we test.
In the fall of 2020, Health Canada conducted its own study, and it found the BTNX rapid test was 100% effective at detecting COVID-19 in patients with the very highest viral loads, like the super spreaders. But in other infectious patients, the test sensitivity plummeted, far below what the company had claimed. Other studies by the British and German governments found similar, even lower results. Experts say this means a positive test result could be trusted, but not a negative one.
Typically, we would say that's unacceptable and deem that the test is not good enough to be able to let us know that an individual is actually infectious.
In response, BTNX accused Global News of cherry-picking data. It said the Canadian and German health ministries used poor samples which did not accurately represent test efficacy, though regulators around the world were using the same method. BTNX provided results from several private studies showing higher sensitivity levels, conducted in countries such as Pakistan and Mexico, but it declined to share the raw data.
Remove the swab.
In February 2021, Health Canada approved the BTNX test. If used properly, the instructions said the tests were more than 90% effective.
I think it's outrageous that the public wasn't as aware of the discrepancies in the testings that had real-life implications.
Health Canada said it had no plans to reassess the BTNX device. A spokesperson said all authorized tests are supported by scientific evidence demonstrating that they consistently met standards to provide accurate and reliable results. Janet Foley feels her trust in the rapid tests was betrayed. In 2022, Foley's mother, Marilyn, died of COVID-19. It's unclear how the virus entered her nursing home. Her last moments with her mom were spent in full PPE, holding her hand through a glove.
It's unconscionable.
Jeff Semple, Global News, Toronto.
Well,
There you
isn't
have
that
it.
interesting, everyone? I think it's interesting because, you know, here's the thing. You look at the timeline of this. So here's an article from November of 2020, November 30th to be exact. And this article, it talks about BTNX. And it talks about the fact that the tests have been approved in Europe, in United Kingdom, Germany, France, Spain, Brazil, Peru, as well, with a partner in the United States. But the test kits were not approved in Canada. 2 months later, all of a sudden they're approved. I think that's very interesting. Now, you have to wonder, what prompted that? Was that the business itself? Were they told you're not going to get them approved unless you do X? That we don't know. But what we do know is they weren't approved as of December 1st of 2020. And then in February of 2021, all of a sudden they were approved, and Canada bought 400 million of them between February of 2021 and the summer of 2022. $2 billion. Just saying. And they are manufactured in China. Why does everything always have to come back to China with this government? That's something else. So, as usual, we don't just sit here and show you a news clip and then move on. Since Fox has a bit more specialty in this than I do, she did a little bit more digging. So let's bring up one of the documents that was provided by Global News.
So we were able to find the raw data referenced in these studies that BTNX allegedly completed. And we're going to provide a link to that in the description. It'll bring up a Google Drive. And this is one of the documents in the Google Drive. It pretty much explains the discrepancies in the data and what was found.
So there's a lot of words, a lot of numbers on this. But this is really what you need to know here. What this is saying is that in the clinical data, in the clinical trial, where they're measuring the effectiveness of the test, in total, there were 348 test cases or specimens. And the overall sensitivity or efficiency or effectiveness of the rapid test was 80.2%, scraping the bare minimum of what the test was required to do.
Yeah, the World Health Organization requests that the test be at least 80% sensitive. So, I mean, 80.2 is like just sneaking by.
Right. But there's more to it than just the efficacy. So the second line here is saying there's 216 specimens in the edited version. So what this is saying is BTNX actually removed over a third of all of the test cases, and that dropped them down to 216 remaining. That raised the overall sensitivity or efficiency or effectiveness of the rapid test all the way up to 94.55%. So they're trying to claim, well, you know, we're just following the guidelines of the United States and the CDC and all of that. Well, isn't that interesting that it increased the overall sensitivity of your tests by 14%?
Well, and it's kind of like this. Imagine you're rolling a die and you roll it 100 times in a row and you want to count how many times you get the number 6. Now imagine that every third roll you just get rid of. Like you don't count it towards your total of 6s rolled. That's kind of what's happening here, is that they're taking this data set, the full data set, and they're saying, okay, well, we're going to remove almost a third of them, And then that's our new data set. That's our real result. That's not how you do science.
Let's take a look at the next document.
So this is from that same Word document, and it's describing and explaining the other charts and graphs and documents that are in this Google Drive that explains the differences between the data set. Like, you can go in, and again, we'll provide the link, and you can see the raw data, but there's so much of it. And this Word document really breaks it down for the layman to understand. And
it's essentially describing how they doctored the results.
Exactly. So if we scroll down a little bit to where it says step 2, limiting data to only rapid tests taken within 14 days of the onset of symptoms. The editor appears to have removed all values from site 1 where more than 14 days passed between symptom onset and the time the sample was taken. So as a result, 44 specimens were removed, and this includes 6 false negatives. Why is that significant? It's significant because the individual or the specimen was positive, but on the test it was showing negative. That's really bad.
So the test showed that they didn't have COVID when they actually did.
Right, because if you're taking one of these tests, for example, to go to work, to go to visit a loved one in a nursing home, and you test negative, but you're actually positive, that's bad.
And this would be also why they would have removed these types of results from the clinical trial, because this would have shown Health Canada that their test was not effectively picking up COVID. And it was allowing people to have essentially a positive COVID infection, but they were reporting that it was a negative, that they didn't have COVID. That's a big problem if you're using these tests to allow people to enter different sites. So going back to that document, all of this comes down to here, which is that 132 number we talked about before. So what does this mean? 132 specimens were removed, and 37, that's 25% of these specimens, 37 were false negatives, meaning 37 of these tests should have been positive, but were marked negative because the test couldn't pick it up.
Right. So pretty much 1 in 4 tests is not detecting COVID.
So moving on to the last page.
So if we look at the last chart in this page, it shows in the column under sensitivity, the white column, what the reported sensitivity of the test was for different levels of infection. You've got less than or equal to 7 days, between 8 and 14 days, and less than or equal to 14 days. So you can see the different sensitivity levels there.
So sensitivity, for everybody that is kind of curious here, that means how well did the test actually detect a positive case?
Exactly. So in the top row here, the equal to or less than 7, the test detected COVID about 4 out of 5 times, allegedly. Then you look at the column on the right, the column that's in yellow, and these are the actual values. So these are the values without the adjusted data. So this is the values with the original data of that 348 samples. So now you can see it really brings down the sensitivity of the test. The top one's almost 20% less sensitive.
So it means that the real value of that is only about 63%. That's like a C minus, right? So far below what you would need for an actual test to detect if something's even there. Now, the second one, 8 to 14 days. Okay, so that brings it down to about 82. So basically, what you can get from this chart is that if you've had COVID for less than 7 days, this test is no good at all. And you only start to really show symptoms after day 5. And by that point, you'll know anyway. And that's the whole problem with this thing. So the government spent $2 billion
of your taxpayer money.
Yeah, on tests that didn't even work. And where did we get them? Oh, China. Surprise, surprise.
But not only that, as they said in the video, that the test is very sensitive when somebody is a super spreader, or they've got a high viral load, meaning that they're
really infected.
Yeah, like they've got lots of the virus in their system, and then they can spread it to other people. But if you're asymptomatic, it's not picking it up. In some cases, it was saying it's not picking it up at all. But as we know, you're still contagious. So again, our government spent all this money, your money, on tests that didn't work. They didn't do what they were supposed to do.
Right, and this was all in the name of keeping people safe. And, gee, it looks like it didn't really accomplish anything, because we saw these tests everywhere. We had them at home. And we were testing at one point when we were sick, and this was the test that we used. And now looking back on it, who knows?
Oh, it makes total sense, because Cypher had caught COVID first, and then I was probably about 3 or 4 days behind him, and I had tested negative all the time. And then the day I lost my sense of smell, that's when I tested positive. Because I probably had a high viral load at that point in time.
And that was the same for me, so it didn't matter. Didn't matter. So, you know, it was funny because there was rules going around. Oh, well, you know, it's like so many days after you have a positive test, you know, then you're okay and you're not contagious. Well, who knows at this point, because these tests were no good. Absolutely no good. We spent $2 billion on these for 400 million of them, and you gotta wonder what happened between December 1st and February. Given everything else that has gone on with this government, it makes you wonder if somebody high up decided to make a little purchase on the side, or have somebody make a little purchase for them in some shares of this place, and then all of a sudden Health Canada says everything's fine, and Health Canada isn't willing to look at the data again. Something's very fishy here, folks.
Well, and not only that, but you have various disease experts saying this test cannot be trusted if you receive a negative result. It can only be trusted if you receive a positive. That's not how tests are supposed to work. Could you imagine going to your doctor for a test for any disease you could think of, and the doctor saying, well, you might have it, you might not, I don't know. But if you come back with a positive, then you definitely have it.
Right. So this is just one more reason to be absolutely pissed at this government. Because this, like... Sorry, this doesn't make sense. And there's a lot more to this than just a company, you know, doctoring some figures here. So, you know, good on Global News for actually digging into this. And we're happy to bring this to you so you understand where more of your money was actually spent.